Now that my wife works from home, she's been asking for one big office upgrade, and in this video, I'm gonna make it happen. After spending over 15 years in nursing, one thing my wife got used to was being on her feet and moving around all day, unlike me, who's had a corporate desk job for over 20 years and whose pale, atrophied legs don't even make my chickens jealous.
An unfortunate reality.
A standing desk can make a world of difference, but being able to make one custom and add some sweet extra features can make it that much better. I'm going to make this desktop out of 8-quarter white oak, and that leads me into tip number 1, which is to save yourself some money by buying the base of the desk by itself and building your own custom top. After researching standing desks across multiple brands, I noticed 2 things. There is a wide range in cost on these mechanical bases, anywhere from $150 to $550, depending on how stout and powerful the frame and motors are. I look at this like you kind of get what you pay for and you have some options to fit your budget. The other thing that I noticed is that these companies make a lot of their money off selling you the rest of the desk and accessories. Many of the companies don't even offer solid wood as an option, and the ones that do charge a hefty premium for them. Adding an 1.5-inch thick solid wood top can cost upwards of $700 over the cost of the base. And that's more than double what I spent on all this white oak for this project. Once I have my boards all cut to size, it's time to make what I think is the most important decision of this build, which is how am I going to go about making this top look as good as I can. Some people focus solely on making sure that the growth rings alternate in different directions to try to prevent any warping. I think this is a bit overblown compared to the difference that you can make paying attention to how the boards match up to one another and avoiding any knots, holes, or other defects showing on top of the desk. Once I'm happy with the look, I'm going to go ahead and glue this up into 2 halves because I can't fit the whole desktop through my planer to clean it up. The next tip I want to share with you is that I'm using nothing but wood glue here. You may wonder why I'm not using dominoes or dowels for added strength or alignment. Both of those are great options in applications where the boards are attached at right angles, like breadboards, or if you're making cabinet parts where the additional strength is needed. But for a straight line glue up like this, the glue provides all the strength that's needed. And these boards are already pretty flat as is, so a small clamp across the joints can tame any unruly boards and get those seams lined up nice and flush. Once the glue dries, I'm going to run these 2 halves through my planer just to get them down to 1.5 inches and clean up the surfaces. This top is already looking so amazing, but I do still have one last glue up to get the whole top together. I'm being really careful this time because this is it. Any errors in the alignment are going to have to be taken out when I'm sanding. So I'd rather invest the extra time now than spend extra time sanding this flush later. After the glue dries, I can run a saw across the ends of the table to get everything clean and crisp. Then I'm going to set this top aside for a little while so I can work on some drawers. One thing I regretted when I built my first standing desk a couple years ago was not adding storage. Just something to hold pencils, notepads, the kind of stuff that can end up cluttering a desktop. I cut up some 3/4-inch white oak to make the cabinet boxes, and I'm going to bang these together with dominoes. Unlike gluing up a desktop, this is actually where the domino shines. I thought at first I might be able to use pocket hole joinery on this, but that'd be an awful lot of pocket holes in a very tight space. This way I can just add some glue and tap everything together. Since these are solid wood cases, I oriented the grain direction of the back and bottom to be the same. That way as the bottom expands and contracts, the back is going to move along with it in the same direction. I'm also going to go ahead and clean the glue squeeze out as I go. Even though the inside of these drawers is really never going to be seen, I do have to install some drawer slides and I don't want any interference from dried glue. The sides then pop on relatively easily and everything gets clamped up. If you're asking what about those small mortises that look like they're for hinges, well, they're not, but I'll explain what they are for later in the video. For now, I need to build some drawers. To make those, I decided to use some scraps of Baltic birch ply that I had from a previous project. These drawers are so small they don't really require much material, and buying a full sheet just wasn't justified. So, today I pour one out for all my wood hoarding homies who said, one day I may use that, and they never did. Smile down, my friends, and know that I scored one for all of us. Where was I? Oh yeah, so you know where you thought I should be using dominoes, but instead I just used glue, and then when I could have used pocket holes, instead I used dominoes? Well, now I'm using pocket holes. This is the same method that I use for all the drawers I make, and I think it's one of the best uses for pocket hole joinery. I like how quick it is to get all the drawers together, and there's no mess because there's no glue. These tiny drawers won't ever hold that much weight, but even for a full-size cabinet, this method is plenty strong. I like aligning the slide along the bottom edge of the drawer, that way I can use the slide itself to find out exactly where to attach it. Then I can use a scrap of 1/2-inch ply to locate where the other side is going to go inside of the drawer box. A pro tip is to install slides using some type of positive reference like a scrap of plywood versus measuring and marking. This way you know the slides are going to be exactly parallel on both sides no matter what, and you don't have to think about it or risk messing up a measurement. And the drawer just slides right in. Pun intended. Now, to explain those mystery mortises on the top. I wanted to find a very low profile way to attach the drawer boxes to the underside of the desk, and to do that I came up with the idea of using aluminum flat bar. So I cut mine to length at the miter saw and then drilled a pair of holes on each end. The outer holes will be used to fasten the bar to the drawer box, and then the inner holes are going to be used to fasten the drawer box to the table bottom. And I just need to widen that second set of holes into slots, that way I can account for wood movement and then drop them right into those mortises. And this way they sit below the surface and the drawer box is going to fasten flush to the bottom of the table. And to cut those shallow mortises, I just set up a straight bit in my router table and kind of worked the piece back and forth until I got to depth. The only other way I could think to do this safely was to do it with a chisel and mallet, so if you don't have a router, there is another option to get this job done. The drawer fronts get cut a little narrower than the sides. This is going to allow for a small gap at the top, which is going to prevent any interference or binding against the tabletop. And attaching these are easy, it just requires a clamp and a couple screws. And if you're wondering about drawer pulls, well, at this point, so am I. I really haven't figured out exactly what I want to do there because I'm really liking the clean and flush look of these drawer fronts. That's something I'll figure out down the road. I'm really not too worried about it right now. I think what I may end up doing is routing a small finger hold into the bottom edge. That way I can keep the clean look of the fronts. And with the case all together, I can sand all the joints flush. Another accessory that I regret not building for my old standing desk is a monitor stand. My new design has this nice curved profile in it to match the curve that I'm going to put in the front of the desk, and to make that happen, I'm going to share with you one of my favorite tips. Anytime you build furniture with sweeping curves or any type of complex angles to them, it pays to make a template. It could be made from paper that you print out or something more substantial like plywood. Making a template means that you can have a chance to experiment and play around with your designs before you commit to cutting up anything in your project material. And because this is an experimental process, template design is kind of fluid, but it does help to add some guide marks like where you want the beginning and end of a curve to be or how deep you want that curve to go. Placement of holes, rounding of corners, things like that. And one of the best hacks for making large sweeping curves is to use a flexible straight edge. To cut away the waste, I'm going to use a jigsaw and then stay about a 1/16 of an inch away from that line. Then you can just use a sander to sand back to that line. Sanders are also great for rounding off the corners. And holes are easy too, you just need to use a drill bit that matches the size of the hole you want. So to attach the template to your workpiece, I like using two-sided tape. The holding power is really strong and it doesn't require any fancy jigs with toggle clamps to make the cuts. I could immediately begin using a router with a flush trim bit, but I find it easier to cut away the bulk of the waste using my bandsaw. If you don't have a bandsaw, that's okay, you can still use your jigsaw. You're just going to want to draw a reference line in front of the template, remove that template so that you can use the jigsaw, and then reattach the template right where you drew the line. And finally, we can go ahead and use that router with a flush trim bit to remove the remainder of the waste. This can be done with a handheld router as well. The procedure is the same, but upside down, or right side up, whatever. Regardless of how you do it, don't mess up and forget about grain direction like I just did. So whenever you cut a curve, there's going to be a change in the direction of the grain, which can tear out like this. We can fix this though. I just need to realign my template, moving it back about a 1/16 of an inch. Now I'm only going to cut halfway down the curve, then change directions and make a climb cut. Making this cut can be, well, surprising if you don't have a firm grip on your workpiece. That's because the bit is now spinning in the same direction that you're moving the work across the bit. Basically, it wants to grab your workpiece and throw it. And now I've removed enough of that gouge that I can clean the rest of this up during finish sanding. To make the hole for cable management, I need to use a Forstner drill bit. And to help make that cut, I'm going to use a portable drill guide. Think of it like a portable drill press. It connects to your cordless drill, and then you can position that over your target area. And one thing I suggest with these big Forstner bits is it's a good idea to clamp the guide down to your workpiece so that it doesn't shift around during such an aggressive cut. Now I can just hog out all this material and not have to worry if the drill bit is staying at a perfect 90 degrees. Man, look at that pile of shavings. This gets quite messy, so a shot of compressed air to clear the area is in order. As you can see here, I left a little material by drilling with a slightly smaller drill bit. That way, if the workpiece gets chewed up by a dull drill bit or there's some blowout, I can use the router bit to cut the waste flush to the template and clean all that up. And that's how you keep your holes sparkly clean.
It's disgusting.
Oh boy. Well, moving right along.
Okay, now I need to cut the same curved profile in the front of the desk, but this time I'm going to use a more interesting method.
Over the past few months, I've been hiding my newest addition to the shop, and now that I've gotten comfortable with operating it, I'm finally ready to share it with you all on the channel. Through a partnership with Avid, I've added a large format CNC to the workshop. I've always loved technology, and I'd say it's one thing that might rival my love for woodworking. So being able to mix those two things together is definitely something I'm interested in doing. I've tinkered around with smaller CNCs over the years, utilizing them back in my pre-YouTube days when I used to make and sell cutting boards. But for a while now, I've really wanted to leverage the digital side of making to greater effect, and Avid has been really gracious in helping me figure out how to make digital fabrication a bigger part of my woodworking and to periodically share those learnings with you here on the channel. Showing you how I design my projects using 3D CAD software and then bringing them to life using CNC 3D printing and lasers. I know all these things are going to make me so much more efficient, allow me to explore more creative design, and customize and enhance my work in new ways. So a big thanks to Avid for making this possible, and look, my top is done and we can move on to the rest of the build. See? So efficient already. The only other thing I want to do to the top is to knock off those edges using a chamfer bit in my palm router. But that's not going to happen if it keeps moving. Bench cookies to the rescue. Now it's nice and grippy. Aside from being one of the messier activities you can do, using a small router like this is so satisfying. And remember to get the cable hole as well, and we are good to go. After a thorough sanding and another blast of air, it's time to finish the desk. To do this, I'm using a hard wax oil, and this one is from Rubio Monocoat. It's their 5% smoke color, which I tested on a sample piece of white oak, and I really like how the white pigment added some pop to the grain of the wood. If you're not familiar with hard wax oil finishes, it's very close to the wood feel and is dead simple to apply. You just pour it on and use a scraper or a credit card to cover the work surface. I then go back and use a white Scotch-Brite pad to really work the color into the grain, and after it sits for about 10 to 15 minutes, I can just wipe off the excess with a cotton rag, old pair of tighty-whities, whatever you got laying around, and that's it. See? I told you it was dead simple. Also make sure that you clear out any of the pinholes or other imperfections so you don't have a white blob of finish staring you in the face. And so while I wait for the finish to cure, I can go ahead and make good use of my time and build the base of the standing desk. I need to be able to attach the drawers to the bottom of the table, but to do that I need to use the base as a reference to know exactly where to place them. I'm not going to bore you with the whole assembly, but I did want to mention that this base is from a brand called Uplift. They're not sponsoring this video, I just had a really good experience when I used them on the first standing desk that I built, and so I'm going to go ahead and use them this time around. For 2 years, the standing desk in my office has worked flawlessly, and I have absolutely no complaints about the base. I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description below if you want to check it out for your own build. And now I can introduce said base to the top and make sure that I'm all spaced evenly. According to my design, these drawers should nestle right into where the cross brace meets the leg assembly. And from the looks of this, it looks like that the manufacturer's measurements online were very accurate. Now that I'm positive everything fits together, I can go ahead and fasten the base to the top. I need to pre-drill these holes, and I'm using a tape flag as a depth stop so that I don't blow right through the top of the table. And drive the screws home. Then I can do the same thing for each of the drawers using the aluminum bars that I installed. The only challenging bit here is getting inside those small drawers to drive 4 screws, but luckily there's a tool for everything. This little bike wrench works perfectly for this job. Then in go the drawers, and on goes the brains of this operation. And now I can get the first glimpse of the finished top. I really love the low profile drawers and the curve in the front, and the finish really makes this white oak pop. Okay, enough oogling. I need to finish this monitor stand. One thing I really like about my standing desk is that I integrated a hidden wireless phone charger. It turns out it's nice that when you're sitting at your desk for hours all day that you have a phone laying there and it's being charged constantly without having to have a cord laying around. But adding it to the monitor stand makes a lot more sense than integrating it into the desktop, so that's what I'm doing this time. I'm going to build a small center console using dominoes and then add a piece of plywood at the top. The main purpose of this plywood is just to provide a place for the charger to attach to, since my monitor stand is a little too thin to implant the charger fully. Once that hole's been cut, I can then add a small wire access hole to the back. I'm going to use dominoes to attach the console, but this is kind of tricky. I decided the best approach was to line it up as best I could and then mark reference lines where the dominoes needed to be cut. I'm only adding one domino per side, and these won't be glued into the monitor stand. Friction is going to be enough to hold it in place, and this is going to give me an option down the road if I want to change something out. Then I can mark out where I need to drill the holes in the stand, leave only about 1/8 of an inch of wood at the top. This will ensure that the charger is close enough to the phone to make contact. Then I can use the tiniest drill bit ever to make a pinhole through the top. You'll see why in a minute. I'm attaching the legs to the monitor stand the same way, just using loose dominoes, no glue. Then the center console goes back in place, and the charger, which is from Mocket.com, goes into its new home. A couple tiny screws are going to cinch it into place so it stays in contact with the top, and that's it. When I plug in the charger, a little LED is going to shine through that tiny pinhole I made so that you always know where your target is when you need to charge your phone. Pretty nifty. All right, so there is one more feature that I want to add to this desk, and I think this one is the one that I'm most stoked about, and that's adding LED lights to the area underneath the monitor stand. To make that happen, I cut a shallow recess under the stand using my palm router, which is going to house the track that the LEDs sit in. The router bit's going to leave rounded corners, and so I need to go back and square those up with a chisel. Now I can cut this aluminum track at 45 degrees and tap it into place. The aluminum track is going to act as a heat sink for the LEDs and also protect them. I follow the path of the recess, making 45-degree cuts and fitting them together like this. These LEDs have an adhesive backing that's going to help them stick to the track, which makes installation pretty easy. And the LEDs can be cut at these copper terminals, which means that you can create custom links with them. And connecting all these strips back together is easy using these connector wire jumper thingies that just crimp onto those copper terminals. This way you have one continuous circuit of LEDs even though they're all running in different directions, which I think is pretty cool. Now that I have all my wires connected and tucked away, I can add a diffuser strip, and this is not only going to soften the LED light but also protect them from damage. Now it's time to test this job out. I'm going to use this controller and plug it into the LEDs, and then my power supply goes in here, and woohoo! Man, I am so relieved that worked. And the controller that I'm using is Bluetooth enabled, which means that these LEDs can be controlled using an app on your phone. Pretty darn cool. The only minor inconvenience is that you need the app to turn the lights on and off, and I wanted to make something a little more convenient, so I bought this little touch on-off switch. This plugs in between the power supply and the controller, and now I can turn these lights on and off and still control them with the app. And I want to put this button on the front of the center console, which means drilling a hole big enough for the switch to fit in. But when I was installing this, I discovered a small problem, realizing that the threads on the back of the button weren't long enough to go all the way through the wood so that I could use the ring nut to fasten it. So I'm going to have to go to plan B and just epoxy this button in place. Not ideal, but it'll get the job done. With everything connected, I can go ahead and tuck all the wires inside the console safely before popping some rubber feet on the bottom of the stand. Wow, this desk turned out amazing. I really love the design, and I also love that Rubio finish on the white oak. And the extra features it has are going to make this so much more enjoyable for my wife to use in her new home office. To be honest, I'm kind of a little jealous. I think my wife's desk is way more awesome than mine. Thanks for watching, and until next time, have fun in the shop.